Hey everyone, this is JDAcer64. A lot of folks on Discord have been asking me how to set up mods for Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door that use Piston Miner's REL framework, and I thought I would make this video tutorial to cover a lot of the basic ways of doing that for some of the most common systems. So what exactly is the REL framework? The REL framework is a toolchain made by Piston Miner which allows for custom C++ code to be compiled into the relocatable module, or REL, format that the GameCube uses for loading dynamic libraries, which add additional code and data alongside what's in a game's main executable. So the benefit to using the REL framework for mod authors is, especially if you're writing a mod that is heavy in gameplay changes, it means you don't have to do a bunch of changes in assembly and manually writing branches to hook your own code in. You can instead express that in C++ as well as any other code you want to do. There's also helper utilities for working specifically with TTYD's event system, which is very nice. So once a mod author has created a custom REL for their mod, this can be packaged into a GCI file, which are the files used by GameCube memory cards, and then it can just be stored natively on GameCube memory cards and bootstrapped via a couple of different methods, which I'll go over for whatever system you're wanting to run this on. So having the mods packaged this way is actually convenient for the end user as well. Rather than having to dump the Thousand Year Door as an ISO file and patch that with every new version of the mod that comes out, you can instead get each new mod version's GCI file and replace the old one, and then no other part of the setup needs to be changed. You never have to touch the ISO. You don't even need the ISO if you're running with a retail disk on a modded Wii, and I'll explain how that works later. So in the description, I have a link to a text guide that I've been pointing people to for help on installing these mods before. The REL mods that currently are maintained are Zephiles' practice codes, the randomizers, which are for randomizing items and for loading zones, my shuffleizer, and my infinite pit mod. And the latter two only work for the North American version of the game, but Zeph's practice codes and randomizers work for any retail version of the game. If you have any questions about installation that aren't covered by this video tutorial, I'd suggest checking out the text guide and reading it in more detail. You can also click the links here to go to the GitHub repos for any of these mods to find out more about what they're about. So for whichever platform and whichever of these Thousand Year Door mods you're planning on playing, there are 3 basic steps to installing it. The first step is to go to the GitHub page of the respective mod and download the GCI file that contains that mod's code. The second step is to load that GCI file onto whatever you're using as your memory card. And the third step is to bootstrap that code by one of 2 methods. You can either use arbitrary code execution using a specially hacked TTYD save file, or you can use a Gecko code to load it. And I'll go over both of those options for all of the setups that I'll show you how to do. And in a nutshell, that's it. That's the entire setup. All you'll need beside that is a retail disk of Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, or you'll need to dump that disk and have a clean, unmodified ISO of the game. If you've dumped an ISO already and you want to make sure it's a clean dump and you haven't patched anything to it or whatever, you can open up Dolphin and go to the game properties here and to the Verify tab and hit Verify Integrity. So if you have a clean dump, it should say this is a good dump. It should show you these numbers here and say from redump.org that it's a good dump. And these exact numbers will be different based on whether you have the US, the PAL, or the Japanese version of the game, but this will tell you that you've done it correctly. So now that you have the original disk or a clean dump of the game, let's go ahead and do step 1 here and get the GCI file for whichever mod we're interested in. I'm going to do Infinite Pit just because I've been wanting to test that on console recently anyway. So what you do is go to this text document and just follow the link to whichever mod you're interested in. Here where it says Releases, click on the latest release, which at the time is 2.10.1 R54, and then you'll want to download the GCI for that, which you can do by just left-clicking it, and it'll just download it. And just move that to wherever you want it to be for later. So at this point, I'll show you the different setups that you can do to play this on different platforms, and I'll give timestamps in the video and also the description that you can jump to for whichever setup you're interested in doing. So I'll walk you through 3 different setups, the first being a Wii with Homebrew and then a physical TTYD disc and GameCube memory card. The second will be using a Wii with Homebrew and using Nintendont to boot the game with an emulated mem card. This should also work for the Wii U, but I can't confirm that because I don't have a modded Wii U. And then the third setup will be just running on Dolphin. So you can go ahead and skip forward to the part of the video that goes over the installation you're interested in. And if you're interested, you can cut back at the end to hear some tips and tricks, shoutouts, and that sort of thing. So the first setup I'll walk through is using a Wii with a physical game disc and memory card. I will assume that you've already got the Homebrew channel installed. That's beyond the scope of this instruction thing. You can look up Letterbomb. It's pretty easy to do. So assuming you've got the Homebrew channel installed, the next thing you'll want to do is download the GameCube Mem Card Manager, or GCMM app for the Wii. And I've got a link to that in the description. So here on the GitHub page, we'll just download the... And I can show here, this is the main GitHub page. You can click on the latest release, and I'll download the zip file here. So this varies based on version, but for this particular version, there's like a few different folders here. One of them's called Wii, and inside this are 2 folders. One says GCMM, and the other is GCMM-dark. And I think the only difference between these are, like, these are the files required for the app to run, but one's light mode and one's dark mode, so I'll just choose one to extract here. To downloads is fine. And yeah, now there's this here. So you'll want to copy this entire folder onto your SD card into the apps folder here. So now that's in the apps folder, and that should be set up. So now that you have the GCMM data copied into your apps folder, you will want to go to the root of the SD card and make sure there's a folder called MC Backup, all capitals. If you don't have one, which I already do, then you should create one. And this will be where backups of memory card files will be stored. And the last thing you'll want to do is copy the GCI you downloaded before for Infinite Pit or whatever mod you're using into this folder. And that's it for now. You can just eject your SD card at this point. Okay, so now that we've got the SD card back in the Wii, let's boot up the GCMM app that we've just installed. Okay, so the control guide here in GCMM is a little clunky, but basically you have 3 different modes of operation you should be concerned about. The restore mode, which is controlled with X on the GameCube controller or plus on a Wiimote, it moves files from your SD card onto your GameCube memory card, and the backup mode does the opposite. It moves them from the memory card to the SD card. And then the delete mode, that deletes files from your GameCube memory card. Okay, now that we know what all our options are, the first thing we're going to want to do is move the Infinite Pit GCI that we put on the SD card already onto the memory card. So pressing X to restore mode will allow us to do that, but first I'm going to hit Z to go into delete mode to make sure that there isn't already an Infinite Pit or some other mod rel file on there already. So I press Z and then A to select the slot. So as we see here, I already have an Infinite Pit GCI on here, so I need to delete that first. I'll press Z to confirm. So now I'll press X to go into restore mode, A to select the slot, put my new Infinite Pit file on here, or Infinite Pit code, I should say. So press A, updating memory card. Okay, restore complete. So that's done. Okay, so now we have the Infinite Pit GCI on the memory card, but in order to load it, we need to have some way of bootstrapping that. So if you're running off an actual memory card and disk, the best way to do that is to use the hacked save file method. So to do that, first we're going to have to get any TTYD save file we already have on the card off of it. So I could go straight into delete mode with Z to delete it, but I want to save my save file first, so I'll use the backup mode, which is to press Y, So this is my save file. So let's go ahead and copy that off with the A button, backup complete. And now we can delete it. Hit Z, then A. And now I'll delete this save file. Alright, so now I'm set up. I have my save file saved to the SD card in case I want to back it back up or restore it later. And I'll have to go back to the PC to hack my save file so I can bootstrap the code. We'll show how to do that in a bit. Okay, so now I've put the SD card back in my PC, and we have the actual TTYD save file backed up on the card. So now that we've done step 2 and put the infinite pit GCI on the memory card, we need to finish up with step 3 and hack our TTYD save file so we can do arbitrary code execution and load that at runtime. There are a couple of options to do that. Linked in the description, there's a link to an online tool that hacks an existing TTYD save file, so it's useful that we back that one up. So here is the save file hacker, and I've got to choose my backed up save file, which will be in the MC backup folder. Date modified. So this is the one we want. See, this one says Mario ST save file 02. That's the most recent one. You can see it was dumped today. So we'll open that. And when we booted the game, we saw that we only had data in file 1. So we could choose any of the other save slots to put a hacked file in. I'll go ahead and choose slot 4 and hit the hack button. So now we've got our hacked REL-Loader file, and we'll put that in that same MC backup folder. You can rename it to whatever you want, so long as it still has .gci at the end. I'll rename it to hacked REL-Loader just so I can see it. So what I just did was took an existing save file that had a save slot I didn't need to use, and then I replaced it with a bootloader. What we could also do is just take a prefabricated bootloader one that has 3 empty files, and then just the bootloader in the other file. And that's fine if you don't care about your existing files, or you're okay with them just being backed up and they don't need to be on the SD card all the time. So you can go here, and Zephiles provided some like prefab ones for us to use for the US, the European, or the JP version of the game. We'll go ahead and download the US one. And we can move that onto the MC backup folder as well. So we could use either one of these. I'll probably just use this one to demonstrate that the other files are still intact. And now we can just eject the SD card and go back to the console to finish up installation. Okay, now with the SD card back in the console, all we have to do is import our hacked save file onto the memory card. Okay, so now that we have GCMM booted up again, if you didn't already delete your TTYD save file, you need to use the delete mode to do that again. But since we already did that, we can hit the X button to restore the hacked TTYD save from the SD card. So what we're looking for is the one that renamed like hacked something or another, hacked REL-Loader. Yeah, this is the prefab one. This will have like all empty files except the one. This one should have my existing file and the hacked one in slot 4. So press A to restore to memory card. Okay, I'm just going to hit Z to go into delete mode just so we can see what's on the memory card again. So we can see we have the save file, and we have the infinite bit code that we put on there before. Then I'll hit B to cancel. And this should all be good. So now we can just close this and boot the game normally. So let's go ahead and close the app. Okay, so now that we have the hacked save file and the GCI for our mod, both on the memory card, we can just boot up our physical disk like normal. So you shouldn't see anything out of the ordinary yet. This is just the standard TTYD boot up sequence because we just booted it from the menu like normal. When we get to the file select screen though, you should see that we have our regular save file that we had in before, and this hacked one in slot 4 like we made. So what you want to do is boot that, reset the game. So when it's reset, when we get to the main menu, we should see the title screen for Infinite Pip. There it is. So now you can boot any of these other files, and you can play the game with the mod active. And not only that, with this particular method, now that you have this booter on the actual memory card, you can play this on any other Wii, on any other GameCube, and you don't have to do any more modding with it. Like, you don't have to do any other fiddling with it, like you want to switch mods around. So yeah, this is the game we'll demonstrate. And that's because it was on an older version of Infinite Pip. That is my bad. Not that far. And there we have it. Infinite Pip. Alright, so stick around till the end, or you can skip past the other setups if you're not interested, and I'll give more tips and tricks, and also shoutouts to some of the folks who helped with this whole process. I'll see you then. So here I'm going to walk you through the process of getting the mod set up on Nintendont with an emulated mem card. I'm going to be running this on a Wii. I believe this whole setup will work on a Wii U as well, but I don't have a modded one to test it on. I'm going to assume you already have the Homebrew channel installed. It's easy to set up, and you can find tutorials for that elsewhere. So assuming you already have the Homebrew channel installed, the first thing you'll want to do is download the files required to run the Nintendont app. So I have a link to this in the description as well. So here's the Nintendont GitHub page, and just following this quick installation, we'll want to download this loader.dol, this meta.xml, and I'm right-clicking this and the icon here. And I somehow have extra copies of all those. It says to rename this boot.dol, and then you'll want to move all of these over to your SD card. In the apps folder, you'll want to make a folder called Nintendont. And then you'll copy those here. And yeah, that's the setup for the Nintendont app. So now that you have Nintendont installed, you'll want to make sure you have your game accessible too. So create a folder called Games if you don't already have one here on the root of your SD card. And then you'll want to make a folder for your version of TTYD named after the game code for that game. So it'll be G8ME01 if you're using the US version, G8MP01 if you're using the PAL version for Europe, or G8MJ01 if you're using the Japanese version. And then inside you should have the game called game.iso. So here's my copy of the game here. I could copy it here and rename it game.iso. I've already done that in this case, so I should be set to go. Once you have both the files for Nintendont and your game ISO on your SD card, you're free to eject it and then move it back to your console. Okay, so now that we have the Nintendont app installed and we have the game's ISO already loaded onto the SD card, let's go ahead and boot up the Nintendont app. Okay, so now that that's loaded, we need to select the SD option, because that's where the game that we have is. And as it turns out, the copy of TTYD that I had on there isn't actually the clean one. This is actually an old version of Shuffleizer, so I can't actually boot the game this way, but thankfully I have the actual TTYD disk in the drive, so we can just do it that way. Either way, you'll want to go to Settings and make sure that you have memcard emulation turned on. You just hit A to toggle it on and off. Then hit B again to close the settings menu. And if you don't already have an emulated memory card for TTYD on the game, because it only does one per game, or rather it makes a separate card per game, you will have to start the game up and make sure that there's a save file that exists. So we'll go ahead and do that. So here's normally where it would prompt you to create a save file if you don't already have one. I already do. So at this point we should be good to go as far as having an emulated mem card. So at this point you can just turn the system off and put the SD card back in your PC. Okay, so now that I have the SD card put back in my computer, we can check this saves folder on the root of the SD card and see that g8me.raw now exists. This is the emulated mem card that was created by Nintendont, specifically for the US version of TTYD. It'll say G8MP if it's PAL or J if it's the Japanese version, but this is what it should look like. So to actually move the Infinite Pit or whatever mod you're using's GCI file onto this memory card, we actually need to have an installation of Dolphin, where we can use the memory card manager tool it has to interface with this .raw file. So I'll go ahead and open Dolphin here. And here we can go to Tools, and then Memory Card Manager. So I'll open the raw file here. And we can see we already have an old version of the Infinite Pit GCI on here. So let's go ahead and delete that, and then import the new GCI on here. So now we have the game code on here, and we have a regular TTYD save file. So that's step 2 done, but even though we have the Infinite Pit GCI on here, that's not sufficient to actually run the mod. So now we need to do step 3 and use one of the 2 methods of bootstrapping this code at runtime. So the first method would be to use an online tool to take this regular TTYD save data and then hack it so that we can perform arbitrary code execution and load this at runtime with it. So to do that, let's go ahead and export this as a GCI. We'll just save it to the desktop so I can find it. So in the description, I have a link to an online tool where we can do that hacking with an existing save file. So let's go ahead and choose that file off the desktop. And then we saw in-game that I had files 1 and 2 already taken up, so I can choose either 3 or 4 to replace with the REL-Loader. We'll just go ahead and say file 3, hit the hack button. And then we have this in downloads, this resulting GCI. So what we'll want to do is delete this old save. You can back it up if you want by exporting it somewhere. I mean, we still have it on the desktop. And then import from downloads the REL-Loader variation of it. So now this is still regular TTYD save data. It's still got the first and second file it had before, but it has a hacked third file. Alternatively, if you want to just use a totally different file than the save data you already had, you could just back up your existing one someplace, and then Zephiles made these prefab REL-Loader files for US, Japanese, and PAL versions of the game, and you can just load this in the game instead. These have 3 empty files and 1 hacked one. I'll just stick with this one for now, though. So we can... this should already be saved. We can close Dolphin. This should be ready to go. And then we can close the USB drive. Let's double check. Yeah, this was modified just now. So now you can just close your USB drive and then put the SD card back in the system to finish up installation. Okay, so now that you've put the hacked save file and the GCI file for Infinite Pit on the emulated mem card, we can go ahead and boot up Nintendont again. And so we'll boot up the SD. Make sure that the settings still have memcard emulation on, and then just go ahead and boot the game. So what we should see here is just the standard TTYD boot up sequence. Nothing out of the ordinary yet. So here we can see we have the 2 save files that we already had, and we have the hacked one that we put in file 3. So go ahead and boot the hacked one up. It should soft reset the game. And when it reboots, we should see the Infinite Pit information on the title screen. these other 3 files and play them on as you wish. So as an alternative to the REL-Loader approach, you can use a Gecko code, which will also be able to load the GCI at runtime. So to do that, you'll want to go to a folder called Codes on your SD card, on the root of your SD card. If you don't already have one, you need to make it. So in this folder, you can see I have some files with the extension GCT. So GCT files contain Gecko codes, and in particular, we need one that has a Gecko code that does the work of like loading the REL from the infinite bit GCI on the memory card. So in the description, you can see I have a link to a repository of Zeph's where he has some pre-made GCTs for exactly that purpose. So here you can see other folders. All you need to care about is the one that says GCT. Now just click on the one for your respective game. G8ME is again the US version, P is the PAL, and J is the Japanese version. So we'll click on this, and you have to hit the download button. So now we can refresh this just to make sure. Okay, now move this GCT file over to the codes folder, and then you are set to go. You can just eject the USB drive or whatever, and then move it back to your console. So now that you have the GCI file for Infinite Pit or whatever other mod, and you have the Gecko code GCT put on the memory card in the right place, go ahead and reboot up Nintendont. So select the SD option again, and in the settings, make sure memcard emulation is still on, and you want to turn cheats on. Just hit A to toggle, B to go back, and then just boot up the game. So unlike the REL-Loader method, once we get to the title screen, it should already have the infinite bit code loaded. There you go. You can play on whatever save files you want. So stick around to the end of the video, or just skip past the Dolphin stuff if you don't care about it, and I'll show some more tips and tricks and shout out the folks that have helped make this possible. So lastly, I'm going to show how to set up the mod on Dolphin, and I'm going to assume that you have some working knowledge of how Dolphin works. You probably already have some version of it installed. But just to make sure that nothing goes wrong here, because there's a lot of different ways it can be set up, I'm going to go ahead and show my preferred way to just get a clean installation of Dolphin and set it up the way I like. You can try to adapt this to the way you have it set up, and if that doesn't work out for you, then maybe try doing it this way. So let's start by going to the Dolphin download page. You can see they have these different beta versions and development versions. These are all just newer versions of the emulator than the stable one that they had like a while back, the stable 5.0, and I would highly recommend getting an up-to-date version. So let's just go ahead and download this latest Windows x64 build, because that's what I run on. And then we can just extract that to the desktop. Okay, so now that we have the Dolphin build on the desktop here, one thing I like to do with all of my installations is put this file called portable.txt in the main directory here. And what this does is this makes Dolphin portable, which basically means all of the configuration, all of the save data that Dolphin generates is stored within this folder here. It's not in some My Documents folder or anything like that shared with all other Dolphin installations, but it's all right in here, and I know no other Dolphin versions could be messing with that. I've run into tons of problems with that when troubleshooting other people trying to get mods started. So let's go ahead and get Dolphin started up here. We'll go ahead and set the desktop here to where it looks for ISOs, and here it's pulled up the English version of TTYD. I've already confirmed, as I showed earlier, that this is a good dump, so this should be compatible with the mod for sure. There's one other thing that we should make sure is set to my liking. Here in the GameCube settings, this determines like where the game stores your memory card data. You could use the memory card option here, and then you would just use the memory card manager here to manage your GCIs. I would strongly prefer you keep it as it's defaulted. Whoops, hold on. Keep it to the default of GCI folder, and we'll see where that is later. So let me just go ahead and boot up the game and like let it make a save. Okay, so the save was created. So now, because we're using portable mode and because we have it set to GCI folder, we can go in this user, GC, USA, because that's the version of the game I'm playing, and then card A. Here, this file was just created, and this is what a TTYD save looks like. It'll be like 137 kilobytes, which is the equivalent of 17 blocks, and it'll have this name, and in GCI, because that's just the format that all GameCube memory saves use, as well as other files on memory cards. So the benefit to using GCI folder as the option there is now this is just like a file on a Windows file system that you can do anything with that you would a normal file. You can copy and paste this somewhere else to back up your save. You can copy GCIs from other Dolphin installations or whatever, and you'll have save files for whatever other games you want. Or in our case, this makes step 2 of the mod setup process very easy. We can just drag and drop, and now we have the infinite pit code here on the memory card already. Now, just having that mod code here on the memory card isn't sufficient to actually have the mod be loaded at runtime. We need some way of bootstrapping that. So for step 3, there are 2 different options to do that. So the first method is to use arbitrary code execution within the game to reset the game and then load this mod code once you load a certain save slot in-game. And to do that, we need to get a hacked TTYD save, which we can do by either doing something to an existing save, or by just getting a prefabricated hack save to replace it with. So first I'll show how to use a utility that Jasper made to hack a save file that already exists. So you can just navigate to here. Here I've already navigated to this folder. We'll select the TTYD save, which it should validate, I think. And now you just pick a save slot. Say, save file 3, hack. And then we'll copy paste that and replace this save with this one. So now in place of that old TTYD save we have the same save. It has all your other save files, but the third file should be replaced with a REL-Loader save. And we'll go ahead and boot up the game and show that off. So you can see nothing looks out of the ordinary right now. We're just booting the game normally. So there wasn't anything in these save files to begin with, because this was a fresh save, but if there had been, they would still be here. This REL-Loader was what was hacked into the save file. So we'll boot that up, and what it should do is reset the game. And it may take a bit to load here. So now that it's reset, we should see the infinite pit has been loaded. And we'll see that here on the title screen. And yep, here we go. And now you can just use any of the other save files and just play the mod as normal. as an alternative to hacking one of your existing saves, you could also go to this releases page where Zeph has provided just prefab hacked saves that have 3 empty slots and then 1 hacked one. It would look similar to what I just did. And just make sure you get the right version. We'd want the US one, obviously. So an alternative way of bootstrapping the mod code, rather than using a hacked save file, you can just use a Gecko code that will automatically load the REL the first time you boot up the game. So Zeph has, alongside his practice codes, but these work for any of the REL mods, he has these resources where you can just get the Gecko code for your particular version. So we want the US one here. So here we see the code itself and like a name for it. So what we're going to do is go to the properties here, go to Gecko codes, and I'll deal with this in a second. Go to add new code. So name, creator, you can do whatever you want for this. And then copy the code here. Make sure you copy it all without the name at the top. And add whatever notes you want. So that should be enabled now. So now you have to configure in Dolphin here, general, enable cheats. And I assume that's what following that link there would have done as well. But now cheats are enabled, that code is enabled. Now if we just boot the game, we should see the Infinite Pit title screen. And there we go. And you're just set to play on whatever files you want. So that's the Dolphin setup complete. Keep watching and I'll go over a few final notes. So as one important final note, no matter which setup or console you are using, if you want to switch between any of these mods that use the REL framework, so you want to use Infinite Pit one day and then you want to use the practice codes the next, all you need to do that is download the GCI for their respective. So here, you can get the releases here, you can get the respective GCI, and swap them out on your memory card. So, say I wanted to get the practice codes instead of Infinite Pit, I would download that. And in my Dolphin installation, I would put that here, and get rid of the Infinite Pit one. And you can back it up, move it to some other folder, rather than just deleting it. But then you're all set. So special thanks go out to PistonMiner for creating the REL framework, which made all these mods possible, as well as Zeph and other folks that helped develop parts of it. Zeph also worked on the Gecko code and also the ACE method that are used to load the mods. And Jasper also did work on the TTYD save hacker that is used for the ACE method specifically. And there are links to their GitHub pages where you can see their TTYD-related tools in the text guide, which is linked in the description. If you're interested in Paper Mario modding in general, there's a link to a Discord server in the description where you can just chat about this mod, other REL mods, or whatever else you're interested in talking about. If you need help troubleshooting, or if there are any installation methods like running on Android or something that I didn't cover in this, you can ask there and folks might be able to help you there. Otherwise, that's it from me. This has been JDH64, and I hope this was helpful to you. And I'd suggest checking out the text guide if there's anything this doesn't cover. It goes in a little more detail in some steps. Anyhow, I'll see you around.